Have you ever sat in your car, maybe in the driveway after a long day at work, and just stared at the steering wheel? You've got the job title, the steady paycheck, maybe even that corner office or the house in the suburbs that everyone says is the dream. But there's this quiet, gnawing feeling in your gut that something is missing. It's a strange kind of emptiness, isn't it? We spend our 20s and 30s obsessed with what David Brooks calls the first mountain. It's that cultural script we've all been handed, especially here in the States. It tells us that life is a vertical climb, a solitary journey upward. We are told to build our resume virtues, to accumulate skills, wealth, reputation, and status. We hustle, we network, we optimize every waking hour to claw our way to the summit.
And for some of you listening right now, you might have actually made it there. You've conquered that first mountain. You've planted your flag. But here is the brutal truth that no one puts in the commencement speeches. The summit is often cold, and it is incredibly lonely. The view might be nice for a moment, but the air is thin. You look around and realize that while you were busy climbing, busy building this monument to your own ego, you left something vital back in the valley.
This is the specific pain of success without fulfillment. It's a very modern, very American paradox. We have more freedom and more stuff than any generation in history, yet we are seeing record levels of isolation and depression. It's what Brooks describes as the catastrophe of hyper-individualism, the belief that we can solve our internal problems with external achievements. So, you're standing there on the peak, holding the trophy, and you feel less alive than when you started. It forces you to confront a terrifying question, one that can keep you up at 3 a.m. What happens when the life you built isn't the life you actually need? In the next part of our conversation, we're going to talk about what happens when you fall off that mountain and why that fall might actually be the best thing that could ever happen to you. That fall, that descent into the valley, isn't the end of the story. In fact, if you look at the map correctly, it's actually the trailhead. You are listening to The Last Read, Books for Your Ears, Wisdom for Your Life. If you haven't already, take a moment to hit that subscribe button so you don't get left behind as we navigate these peaks and valleys together.
Today's episode is special because we aren't just summarizing a book, we are uncovering a survival guide. Most of us spend our entire lives trying to stay on that first summit, terrified of slipping. But David Brooks argues that the secret map to a truly meaningful life, the one most people miss until it's too late, only reveals itself after you've been broken open. It's a guide to moving from the fleeting happiness of the ego to the permanent moral joy of commitment.
If you want to hold this map in your own hands, and I highly recommend that you do, you can find the link to buy The Second Mountain right there in the description. Now, before we start climbing again, we need to meet our guide. You might know him as a polished political commentator, a man who spent decades analyzing the external world of policy and society. But the man who wrote this book is someone very different, someone who had to learn the hard way that the view from the top isn't enough.
David Brooks, a name you probably recognize. For decades, he has been a fixture of American intellectual life, a prominent columnist for the New York Times, a regular face on PBS NewsHour, the kind of person who seemed to have the success equation completely solved. He spent years analyzing the external world, dissecting polls, critiquing policies, and explaining the sociology of the upper middle class in books like Bobos in Paradise. He was the expert on the resume virtues, the skills you bring to the marketplace to build a career, a reputation, and a life that looks good on paper. But the second mountain wasn't born from his expertise. It was born from his emptiness.
A few years ago, Brooks found himself in a valley. His marriage of 27 years had ended, his children had left home, and despite all that professional acclaim, he felt a crushing sense of isolation. He describes this period as being unplanted, lonely, and humiliated. He realized that for all his focus on the external world, the internal one, the landscape of the heart and soul, had been neglected. He famously distinguished between resume virtues and eulogy virtues. Resume virtues are the things you list on LinkedIn, but eulogy virtues are what people talk about at your funeral. Were you kind? Were you brave? Did you love well? Brooks realized he had spent his life chasing the former while starving the latter.
He writes about sitting in his apartment, surrounded by the trappings of a successful life, and realizing that the view from the top of that first mountain wasn't just disappointing, it was terrifyingly lonely. He saw that a life built solely on personal ambition and independence, no matter how shiny it looks from the outside, eventually leads to a spiritual crisis. And this is where his story becomes our story. Because Brooks argues that his personal crisis wasn't unique, it was a symptom of a much larger cultural trap. A trap that tells us from the moment we are born that the point of life is to climb a specific peak, a peak defined by the self and the self alone. We call this the first mountain.
So, what exactly is this first mountain? Well, if you grew up in the West, and specifically in America, you don't just know this mountain. You've probably been hiking it since you could walk. It's the cultural default. It's the script we're handed at graduation, the one that says the purpose of life is to establish an identity, to separate yourself from your parents, to cultivate your talents, and to make a mark. Brooks describes this phase as the era of hyper-individualism. It's a culture that whispers, and sometimes screams, that I am the center of the universe. It tells us that happiness is an individual accomplishment, something you acquire like a new car or a job promotion. And in today's world, this manifests as what you might call the Instagram life.
We all know what this looks like, right? It's the curated feed where everything is shiny. The vacations are perfect, the meals are gourmet, the smiles are wide. But Brooks argues that this is often just a performance of happiness, a form of reputation management. It's a mountain built on ego. It's the student who is obsessed with grades, not because they love learning, but because they need the credential to get to the next rung of the ladder. They are earning their worth, assignment by assignment, terrified that one slip-up will send them tumbling down. Or take the exhausted corporate worker. You know the type. Maybe you are the type. They've got the title, the salary, the success, but they are always on to the next project. They value productivity over people. Brooks talks about this productivity mindset as a trap, where you're so busy climbing, so busy engaging in the gamification of your own life, that you never actually sit down to have a real, messy, vulnerable conversation.
You are climbing, but you are climbing alone. And that is the core tragedy of the first mountain. It is defined by separation. It says, I am distinct from you. I am better than you. I have achieved more than you. But as Brooks points out, the ego is a leaky vessel. You can pour all the accolades and likes you want into it, but it will never be full. You eventually reach the peak, look around at the view you worked so hard for, and realize the air is too thin to breathe. You realize that while you were busy building a resume, you forgot to build a life. And usually, that's when the ground starts to shake, because you can't stay on the peak of the first mountain forever. Gravity, or fate, has a way of bringing us back down. Brooks calls this inevitable descent the valley. It's not just a stumble, it's a season of suffering that changes everything, and it's where we're heading next.
So, welcome to the valley. If the first mountain is about building the ego, the valley is where it gets dismantled. Brooks describes this not just as a bad patch, but as a necessary crisis. It's the space between the two mountains where you're forced to figure out who you are,
when you're no longer defined by what you do. Now, how do you end up here? Sometimes it's a bang, a sudden external shock that knocks you off your feet. Brooks talks about these vividly: a divorce, a sudden job loss, a health scare that makes you question your own mortality. These are the moments that strip away the resume virtues we talked about earlier. When you're grieving or terrified, nobody cares about your job title. But, and this is the really interesting part, sometimes you enter the valley not with a bang, but with a whimper. Brooks uses an ancient term for this: acedia.
It's basically a crushing sense of boredom, or a quieting of passion. It's not necessarily clinical depression, but more like a sluttishness of the soul. He compares it to an oven set on warm. You're just drifting. You've got the job, the house, the car, and you're staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. thinking, is this it? Is this all there is? That is the valley too. And in our culture, we're terrified of this place. We treat suffering like a failure, like a bug in the system that needs to be patched immediately so we can get back to being productive. But Brooks argues that this suffering is actually a feature, not a bug. Think of it like a software reset for the soul. When a computer freezes up because it's running too many contradictory programs, you have to force a crash to get it working again. The valley is that crash. It stops the endless loop of ego maintenance. It cracks you open. There's a beautiful idea in the book that people in the valley have been broken open. The hard shell of the ego, that part of you that says, I am distinct, I am better, gets shattered. And it's only through those cracks that something deeper can emerge.
You stop caring about being impressive, and you start caring about being real. It's painful, absolutely. Brooks doesn't sugarcoat the loneliness of this phase, but he insists that you can't climb the second mountain until you've fallen off the first one. You have to realize that your ego's desires are actually very small, and that you are capable of loving things much bigger than yourself. And that realization is the turning point. Because once the ego is out of the way, you start to notice a different kind of feeling. It's not that fleeting spike of dopamine you get from a promotion or a new purchase. It's something quieter, steadier, and much more permanent. It's the difference between merely being happy and finding joy. And trust me, there is a massive difference between the two, which is exactly what we need to break down next.
So, let's dig into that distinction. In our culture, especially here in the States, we are obsessed with the pursuit of happiness. It's written into our founding documents. It's the engine of the American dream. We tend to think of happiness as the ultimate goal, the finish line. But Brooks argues that we've got the definition wrong, or at least that we are aiming too low. He defines happiness as the expansion of the self. Think about it. When you get a promotion, when you buy that new car, or even when your team wins the Super Bowl, what are you feeling? You're feeling big. You're feeling like you've won. You think, I did this. I am successful. I am moving up. Happiness is about getting what you want. It's a victory for the ego. And don't get me wrong, it feels good, but it's solitary. It's about you standing on top of the pile. Joy is the exact opposite. If happiness is the expansion of self, Brooks says that joy is the dissolution of self. It's those moments where the barrier between you and the rest of the world just melts away. You aren't thinking about your resume. You aren't thinking about your bank account. In fact, you aren't thinking about yourself at all.
Brooks uses the example of a mother holding her newborn baby. When you are looking into that baby's eyes, you aren't thinking, wow, I am really crushing it as a parent right now. No, the ego is gone. The skin barrier fades away. You and that child are fused together in a moment of pure connection. You forget to eat. You forget to check your phone. Time just stops. That is joy. Or take a different example, maybe a darker one, but just as real.
Imagine a neighbor is in a crisis. Maybe a hurricane just hit, or they've had a medical emergency. You rush over to help. You spend 12 hours bailing water out of their basement or sitting with them in a hospital waiting room. You are exhausted, you're hungry, you're covered in mud or stress sweat. You are definitely not happy in the traditional sense. You aren't sipping a margarita on a beach, but you are incredibly alive. You are needed. You are entirely focused on someone else. That feeling of self-forgetfulness, of being used for a good purpose, that is joy.
And here is the kicker. Happiness is fleeting. The new car smell fades. The promotion becomes just another job. But joy changes you. It leaves a mark. It fundamentally shifts your perspective from what can I get to what can I give. Joy is the fuel of the second mountain. But here's the problem. You can't just sit around waiting for these lightning strikes of joy to hit you. You can't build a life on random moments of feeling good when you hold a baby or help a neighbor. You need a way to make that joy permanent. You need to turn that fleeting feeling into a solid structure. And Brooks says the only way to do that is through making promises. He calls them commitments. Specifically, he outlines 4 massive commitments that anchor us to the second mountain, and the first 2 relate to the work we do and the people we promise to love. We're talking about vocation and marriage. But these aren't just job titles and wedding rings. To Brooks, they are something much deeper, something that requires burning the ships and never looking back. So, we have the 4 commitments: vocation, marriage, philosophy and faith, and community. Let's start with the one that takes up the majority of our waking hours: vocation. Now, on the first mountain, we don't have vocations, we have careers. And Brooks makes a very sharp distinction here. A career is something you choose. It's strategic. You look at the market, you look at your skills, and you make a transaction. I will give you my labor. You will give me money and status. It's a ladder you climb. A vocation is different. You don't choose a vocation. It chooses you. Brooks talks about this idea of the annunciation moment. It's that moment where something sparks. Maybe it's an injustice you see that makes you angry, or a beautiful craft that obsesses you. And suddenly, the question flips. It's no longer, what do I want from life? It becomes, what is life asking of me? And the key difference? You can quit a career. When the pay isn't enough, or the boss is annoying, you walk away. That's the rational first mountain thing to do. But you can't quit a vocation. Not really. Because a vocation isn't about your job, it's about your identity. It's irrational. You'll stay up until 4 a.m. perfecting a detail nobody else will see, or you'll endure years of struggle for a cause that pays nothing. Why? Because to stop doing it wouldn't just be a job change, it would be a violation of who you are. It's that feeling of, I can't not do this. So that's the work we do. Then there's the people we love. Marriage. This is where Brooks really pushes back against modern culture. We tend to view marriage through the lens of individualism. We see it as a contract. 2 independent people coming together for mutual benefit. I'll help you grow, you help me grow. And as long as we're both getting a good ROI, we stay together. Brooks says that if you go into marriage with a contract mindset, you're doomed. Because the moment one person gets sick or loses a job or changes, the deal is off. Instead, he argues for the ancient concept of a covenant. A covenant isn't a deal between 2 people. It's the creation of a third thing. You surrender your independent self to build something larger than the sum of its parts.
There's a metaphor that fits perfectly here. The old story of the Spanish conquistador, Hernán Cortés. When he landed in the New World, he ordered his men to burn the ships. It sounds extreme, right? But that is exactly what a second mountain marriage looks like. You burn the ships. You eliminate the exit strategy. You are telling your partner, I am all in.
There is no version of my future that doesn't include you, so we have to make this work. It's terrifying to the first mountain ego, this idea of total surrender, of chaining yourself to another person. But Brooks argues that it's only when you burn the ships, when you close off the option of leaving, that you actually feel safe enough to be vulnerable. That's when the real work of love begins. So, we've anchored ourselves in our work, and we've anchored ourselves in our home. We've stopped climbing for ourselves and started digging in for others. But we're still talking about a pretty small circle here. Just you, your work, and your spouse. To really ascend the second mountain, we have to widen the lens. We have to look at how we connect to the universe itself and the people living right next door.
This widening of the lens brings us to the third commitment, philosophy or faith. Now, Brooks isn't telling everyone they need to convert to a specific religion, but he is saying that to stay on the second mountain, you need a worldview that justifies the struggle, something that explains why giving yourself away is actually a gain, not a loss. For some, that's a deep intellectual commitment to a philosophy. For others, it's religious faith. It's about having a system of belief that acts as a scaffold. You see, when you're in the valley, when you're suffering, or when the ego is screaming for attention, you need something outside of yourself to hold on to. As Brooks puts it, quoting Nietzsche, "He who has a why to live for can endure almost any how." Faith, in this context, is really about acknowledging that you aren't the center of the universe. It's a summons, a call to surrender to something transcendent, something that demands your awe and your obedience. It anchors you so you don't drift back into that first mountain mindset of, "What's in it for me?" And once you have that anchor, you are ready for the fourth and final commitment, community. This is where the rubber really hits the road. We live in a culture of what Brooks calls hyper-individualism. We're taught to be self-sufficient, to keep our hedges trimmed and our fences high. But the second mountain demands the opposite. It demands radical hospitality. Brooks draws a sharp line here between two types of social connection: networking versus weaving. Networking is a first mountain activity. It's transactional. It's, I'm climbing my ladder, you're climbing yours. Let's trade contacts so we can both get higher. It's thin. It's fragile. Weaving, on the other hand, is relational. It's not about climbing, it's about connecting. Brooks talks about community weavers, people who are geniuses at relationships. They don't look at their neighbors as resources, they look at them as family. He tells stories of people like a couple who started by feeding one hungry classmate of their son and ended up hosting a weekly dinner for 25 neighborhood kids, creating a safe harbor for everyone around them. They burned the ships of privacy to build a village.
This creates what Brooks calls a thick community. A thick community isn't just a group of people who live in the same zip code. It's a web of interdependence where people actually rely on one another. They share rituals, they share burdens, they show up. And that brings us to the ultimate litmus test for this kind of life. It's a question Brooks asks that really cuts through the noise of our social media age. He asks, who would you call at 3 a.m.? If you had a medical emergency, or if your life suddenly fell apart in the middle of the night, who would you call? We might have 1,000 friends on Facebook, we might have 500 connections on LinkedIn, but those are thin connections. You can't call a network at 3 a.m. You can only call a weaver, someone you are thickly bound to by promises and shared vulnerability. When you have your vocation, your marriage, your faith, and your community all pulling you away from the self and toward the other, you aren't just living a busy life. You are engaged in something much deeper. You are engaged in a moral quest, a journey that fundamentally changes who you are, and that is where we find the true summit. And that summit looks very different from the one we started climbing back in segment 1. If you remember nothing else from our time together, remember the difference between the first mountain and the second mountain. The first mountain is the one our culture pushes us toward. It's about the ego. It's about reputation management. It's about asking, what can I do to make myself happy? We spend years climbing it, acquiring the right job, the right house, the right status, only to get to the top and find that the view is, well, it's a little empty. It's what Brooks calls the resume virtues. But the second mountain, that's where the real life begins. This is the journey from independence to interdependence. It's moving from happiness, which is fleeting and solitary, to moral joy, which is permanent and shared. Brooks writes something that I think is just brilliant. He says that we tend to worship freedom in our society. We want to keep our options open. We want to be unencumbered. But he argues that freedom isn't the goal. Freedom is a river you want to get across so you can plant yourself on the other side and fully commit to something. That is the paradox of the good life. We think we want to be free from obligation, but we actually find meaning only when we bind ourselves, when we chain ourselves to a vocation, to a spouse, to a philosophy, and to a community. The uncommitted person is the unremembered person. The good life isn't about having 1,000 options. It's about making a promise to the few things that matter most and keeping it. It's a beautiful, challenging vision, and if you want to dive deeper into these 4 commitments, I highly recommend picking up the full book. I've put a link to The Second Mountain right in the description below. It is well worth your time. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next journey. The Last Read: Books for Your Ears, Wisdom for Your Life.